And if you have been with us before, you know what we're going to do next. We're going to push play at the count of 3. So everybody get ready. Hannah, do you want to count down?
Sure. 1, 2, 3.
A blonde.
Are we supposed to? Are we supposed to get that she's a natural redhead, a natural blonde? That's not a natural blonde.
No, I think she's supposed to have dark hair.
Dark hair.
That's definitely a bottle. Or she's probably wearing a wig.
Yeah, if you want to see the wig, watch for when she raises her eyebrows and her forehead. She gets the forehead wrinkles. That's where you can see the line on the wig.
You totally can.
Also, just like when she's like dancing, it's staying relatively put.
Yeah, it's good, but whenever she keeps raising her eyebrows, and every time she does it, you can see that line. Also, wigs always sit a little higher, because obviously the hair is under there, So wig, you can always sort of feel like the head is a little taller.
She's still wearing that awesome red dress.
I love how casually they're talking about murder right now.
And she nonchalantly tells them how to get the stain out.
Ooh,
I
she's
just love
starstruck.
this. I love this like blending of fact and fiction. It's so fun.
It's interesting that we're seeing like this really strong character fumble twice now, like with the mom and with him. That shows her vulnerability, I think.
It's just funny to see her starstruck, you know?
She stood up for him leaving. I love it.
Are there more like real people that over these seasons, like people from actual history?
No spoilers.
Well, no, no. I'm just asking. Should I? Okay, better thing is if it does happen, and if there are more, can you let me know? Because I might not know all of those people. I mean, I know who Lenny Bruce is, but I might not know somebody else. So if it happens, just let me.
Sure. That we can do.
Well, Susie was based also on a real Hollywood agent named Sue, but I don't know.
I posted pictures in Discord of this exact walk the other day. If you want to go look at it.
Oh, that's so fun. And I love Midge's outfit.
Yeah, I was reading that the costume designer decided that pink was her color because she sees things through rose colored glasses, so they've just decided to kind of use that to represent that.
Oof, I love that.
Oh, I
I
like that
love it.
too.
Yeah, I like it too. I was just gonna say all the outfits in this are so awesome.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thought.
And Tiffany, I did not know Susie was based or inspired by a real person. That was a very interesting fact.
Yeah, and well, they wrote it with Alex in mind, but also based on the actual Hollywood age.
Funny, I was talking to my mom recently about just parenting and parenting advice, and just all the plethora of theories and philosophies and books and TV shows and whatnot. And she said specifically, like, yeah, back back in our time, all we had was Dr. Spock. Like we didn't know any better. We all just read Dr. Spock.
She sits on her kid.
Was she reading Dr. Spock?
She was. Diana, did you hear what street she was going?
Christopher Street. They had the correct train too. Christopher Street is on Sheridan Square, which is where Kettle of Fish is now, and also uh, Stonewall Inn. It's like height of West Village.
Ah, thanks.
Susie is amazing. the two single beds.
I was just thinking about that too. It's like so I Love Lucy and that whole era had, that's what they used to do.
I love how dramatic she is.
I love how they're guessing what all of them are in trial for.
Packaged right.
I love how everybody thinks Susie's a man.
Hmm.
That was kind of her like first act of defiance when she's not actually drunk. She's kind of starting to speak her mind.
And that conversation with the lawyer is like a bad version of Who's on First. I love Kevin Pollak.
I like Tweed. The temple seats?
Oh, so they've got a family group seatings at the temple that they paid to always have the same seats, and they had a fight over it because only one of them paid for their share.
Yeah, when it comes to high holy days, they wind up selling seats. Otherwise, it's like a madhouse.
Interesting. Didn't know that.
Every time I hear him say Moishe, it makes me think of my grandfather because his Hebrew name was Moishe Pip.
And they left the money anyway.
I have a feeling that he's right, that Joel will try to come back, but it will not. He will not be successful. That's my prediction.
A new prediction.
Want to put some kernels on it?
I know, right?
Oh my gosh, this guy.
I was surprised when I read that she wasn't
Ugh.
actually Jewish. I thought she was actually Jewish, the actress that plays her. Oh,
Is there a plan? No.
No, there is no plan. Wow, that floor is some serious linoleum.
There's certainly asbestos in that.
he doesn't want to talk to Penny.
Penny Pan. Oh, I love this.
She's wearing pants.
Did anybody tell you what the actual translation to the word goy is?
No.
Besides meaning non-Jew, it's actually a kind of a derogatory term meaning cattle.
Oh, wow.
She forgot to introduce them.
I love it didn't even start playing until like they're just waiting for her.
I think she just left her book on stage.
I love that they didn't call her a him.
What is she doing?
Crashing a men's only club.
Flashback?
I was just
Yeah,
trying to remember if it was.
it is. Yeah.
They didn't give me any clues that they were doing that, so I got a little confused.
I really like them together. They have a really good rapport.
I
Yeah,
loved it.
he's certainly not a Christopher in regards to like the weak man that we were mentioning before. There's something endearing about him.
He's the just enough husband.
He's the what?
Just enough husband.
Oh, the just
He
enough.
does
Okay.
just enough, says the right thing till something happens.
I'm guessing that the name of the episode is going to be coming in this conversation. I was wrong.
And that creepy kid.
Oh, I was right.
Good for her.
I'm going to be right. Bam! Got it.
Bam!
Got it. I was a little worried there for a second. I was like, oh man.
You were worried your predictor was off there for a minute?
Yeah, I mean, there was a part of me that was thinking maybe they're going to do sort of a little flashbacky thing where we go back down there, but I couldn't really think of how. But yeah, it's good.
Yeah, they have weird scene cuts in here.
Look at not Joel, her father's face.
Yeah, now he's like tethered more to Moishe and he doesn't want to. And he's like, oh, I think they forgot to ask her, what do you want?
That was one of the quietest Remarcus rooms that I've ever been a part of.
There was a
I
lot
was
to
just thinking
listen.
that a little while ago. I was like, wow, we're really not talking, but I think there's just, I mean, it's partially the way that Amy writes, and it's just like so, there's so much packed into every episode, dialogue, scene, everything. You're just like, you're kind of sucked into it, and then you're like, oh wow, it's that episode is over. And just now when they're having this conversation, and Joel comes and he says, I want to try again, I'm thinking to myself, it's been 48 hours, right? We're talking about 48 hours. Like, this has not been a lot of time since that scene where he leaves, because she just said this was my first night of freedom, which is really the second night, because the first night was the dinner, I think. Or has it been maybe 3 or 4? It hasn't been that long, right?
No, not very
No, it's
long.
been like what? It's. You're right. I think
Under
it's
a
been
week.
2 days. I think that it's a way. I think it's the way that Amy writes this show because I think that Gilmore Girls, um, at least for me, I mean, watching it for the first time, I think it did inspire more chatter because there's something about the world and the characters that sort of invites in an interactive uh, feel. At least that's how it felt for me. Whereas this, um, really like it feels like I'm reading a novel. You know, like it just really feels like I'm in that
Yeah.
I have to focus
It
in a
really pulls
great
you in.
way. And I
It
mean, of
makes you
course,
think that you can't miss anything. Like you
yeah,
need to pay attention because there's so much
yeah,
nuance and detail, and then
yeah.
the
Well, it's
world too. Like you're looking around the scenes for all the different elements because it is period and it's shot so beautifully and the world is so beautifully constructed. So I just think it's very like encapsulating in a way.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, for sure,
And I
for
think too, like
sure.
it's like longer sequences. There are not that many cuts in this for this as long as the show is. So I think that it kind of keeps you there as well.
Yeah,
I was thinking a little while ago, I'm like, oh, it's so quiet. Nobody said anything for like 10 minutes. It was great though. I mean, it's not great that we're not talking, but it's great because we're all so into the show.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's I mean, I can feel you all there. That's all that really matters. And of course, like every once in a while, it was interesting to hear little bits of insight here and there.
That's why I,
But
if somebody had said anything about the definition, I thought I lost you guys for a minute there, and I'm like, wait a second, it's just that quiet.
yeah, it's cool. I mean, I think it's very cool. It's a different way to experience content together, but it really is like, I've said it since the beginning that the most powerful part about this isn't necessarily the talking and the chatter. That can be really fun if it's the right show and whatnot. But really, it's more just like knowing that you're watching it with other people, just feeling everybody on the other side of that. I'm watching and I just know all of you are at the same spot that I am, and that's just having the same emotional reactions to things that I am, and that's what is so enjoyable about in general, simultaneous watching, but I think it just works so well with the show because the show is a really deep emotional story that doesn't have that fast paced. um, I can only really say like interactive. There's something about all of that like quick, pop culture referencing and whatnot that sort of invites a sense of of interactivity. That's the best way that I can describe it. Whereas this feels a little bit more like a novel, where you're just sort of in there. You're in the scenes. You're in the words. Uh,
Jason,
it feels to me like they might be they might be playing with the possibility of a romance between a fictional character who's maybe like loosely based on a variety of different people in Amy's life and in history and whatnot, but like totally fictional character Midge and Lenny Bruce, which is so interesting. I mean, I don't know. Am I off base there? That seems to be what's going on because it feels like there might be some chemistry there.
Oh, we can't do spoilers.
We can't do
No,
I
spoil.
but
Oh,
I
right.
always
But
I
okay, then
do agree.
I'm asking people.
I feel it as well.
I'm asking
I
people in the room who haven't watched it yet. Anybody
I
here who
I I was just gonna say I always felt like he's like her first friend outside of her usual group or her
right? Is it
community, her family.
is that weird that I'm like immediately thinking, oh, he's a friend, but because man, woman, like,
No,
of
there's
course they're gonna
definitely sexual tension. It seems. I agree with you completely.
Well, I
Yeah,
mean, that last line where he's like, "Should I have made a pass at you?" and she smiles at that. I mean, um, and they seem like they'd be good together. Like they're they surprise each other.
Do you?
Remember in the first episode when she bailed him out, as he's going down the steps, he looks at the guard and says, "That's not my wife."
Right.
So
He is
he is
married.
married.
Do you think that he would, being that she was just cheated on and left by her husband, do you think that she would be the other woman to Lenny Bruce because he is married.
Yeah, maybe. I mean,
I don't think
yeah.
so.
I don't think
I,
so
I,
either.
I think he.
think in their relationship, it's more um like a mutual admiration sort of thing. Like, I respect what you do, more than anything like sexual attraction or anything like that. I think it's more of a mutual respect.
I
And
just
I
love the
think
way that
that it's okay. Go ahead.
I just love the way that he looked after, like, when she kind of walks over, off stage, because I think this is the first time he's seen her perform. He's run into her. He knows she's a comic. They have witty banter, but he's never seen her, you know, do a little set. And I mean, the look on his face is just like, who are you? Like, just so taken aback by her ability to just kind of pull that out of, off the top of her head. He seems really, like, before, he thought she was interesting and probably witty, but now I think he feels more maybe impressed by her, or there's definitely a different, um it takes a turn, I think, after he really sees her on stage for the first time.
I'm shipping these two.
Yeah, what I would
Yeah.
I my thought is that he may uh do it. I don't think she would. She was just hurt.
Yeah,
So I
maybe
don't think that
maybe
she would
not.
want to
And
be.
I'm not talking about now. I'm talking about like sort of long-term story arc, like, across multiple seasons.
No, it's definitely an interesting theory, and I definitely feel the tension. I just don't think she would be the one to be in a relationship with a
Yeah,
married.
I mean, certainly not now. Certainly not anytime soon. But that like, I don't know. I look for that kind of stuff early in a narrative to see if there's any opportunity for love to grow over the course of the series. Obviously, like, the character is dealing with heartache and loss of love and all of that stuff at the beginning, but yeah, it's just something that I thought about, and if I just feel chemistry between the two of them, that kind of chemistry. And I mostly find it interesting if that were to happen, if, like, over the course of, we're on season they're up to season 3, so, like, maybe over the course of like 7 seasons, those characters either flirt with the possibility and never actually fulfill because they've got obstacles, like maybe he has a wife, or whatever the case may be. um I just think it's interesting that he's a real person, she's a fictional character, and that that they're kind of blending fiction and reality and history, which I just find that so interesting and cool.
Well, it's awesome. It's an awesome technique used by historical fiction writers, right? Is that they explore, um, sometimes very famous people in history through the eyes of a random person that they might have met, right? So there's not really any stakes higher than that. Is that she's part of the scene now, and he is the scene, so it kind of makes sense that he would meet comics in the course of his work. So if you were just writing it and imagining, well, Lenny Bruce was, maybe out nightly doing shows, like, what kind of people would he have met, and she might be one of those people.
Yes, if that's the extent of it. But if it's like, if I mean, again, this is just like totally hypothetical because I don't know anything past what we've seen so far. Um, but if there's like a Lorelai and Luke, a Mulder and Scully thing there, then that would actually be taking that concept to a very new level. I'm not saying that because you're right, that is like kind of I mean, that's like essentially what happens in Annie with FDR. I mean, we see that all the time in historical fiction, but I'm I'm suggesting that there's something a little bit more here in that, like, you could potentially rewrite history a little bit if you wanted, but maybe that's not, maybe that's too much for this show. Maybe they wouldn't do that, um, but I don't know. It's like, I kind of want him. I don't want it to just be that. For some weird reason, I don't want it to just be like, oh, yeah, I mean, Lenny Bruce would have met some random person that it didn't make it into the history books, you know? I kind of want her to make it into the history books. Like, that's sort of what my investment is right now in this story. I want her to become huge. And that didn't actually happen because she's not real. And so if that does happen, then a variety of other unreal things could happen, including that you could rewrite the relationship between Lenny Bruce and somebody that he met. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I'm just looking at it from what we've seen so far, right? Is like I when I watched this the first time, that's kind of where I was, is that, oh, of course Lenny Bruce would have met other comics, as much as he was hanging out with the band, although I feel that scene is kind of unrealistic, but like, like he's out every night and meeting people and meeting and who knows how many people he crossed paths with that ended up becoming super famous as well. I mean, this is a really interesting time in New York City, where all of these artists are converging, and maybe we're meant to believe that she's going to be one of them. um so I think it is cool because we've, like, the first episode we hear that Ginsburg is like there too. It's just like, of course. I do think it's cool though that all of these people might be part of the same art scene, and she just happens to be fictional.
And uh, like I said, I mean, I mean, we're only 3 episodes in, and I want to. I mean, maybe that's silly. Maybe I shouldn't want that, but or maybe that's not the point. But I mean, I want her to be hugely successful. I want her to succeed and in a way become a historic, important person in the comedy scene at this time.
You want what she wants now. That is what
I
she
want what,
wants.
of course, that's what that you're following the protagonist. That's what you want, their wants. So I want that from her. And if we get that, we might not. But if we get that, then, then that's like, that's all alternate history. Which is interesting and cool.
Yeah, and I think, it's kind of funny because Amy has talked about how her dad was going in the same time as Lenny, the real Lenny Bruce was, and she jokes because she was born around the same time that he died, that the real Lenny Bruce died. So she's always like joking, like, I didn't do it, I swear.
Oh, that's funny.
So I think it's
That's
interesting
funny.
that she uses him because she feels like a connection, because like her dad, you know, was around the same time, they were doing the same thing, and then to have that connection. So it's interesting that she put him in the.
I think she also used him because he was controversial and got arrested a lot. And it ties into what she is doing with her main character at this time in the show. She's getting arrested for being lewd. I mean, apparently women are allowed to say naughty words and do stuff like that. And neither is Lenny
Right.
Bruce.
Exactly. Yeah, it is interesting to see like the contrast. So I think this episode was more about parenting, because you see like all the different parent child relationships that were mostly showcased in this episode.
Yes, and the fact that that guy had a picture of his child or his
Right.
baby and she didn't, and she realized it, made her start thinking about her own parenting skills.
Exactly. And I've wondered like how much of her parenting that Is it like her personality, or is it just the way that it was during that time? Because now, like in our modern times, it would be neglectful, and like we see her basically not really interacting with her kids. Like she just pulls them along and she doesn't speak to them as she's dropping them off with her mother and as she's picking them up and talking to Susie in the last episode. And like she doesn't really nurture them or have
I
really conversations with
I kind
them.
of forget that they're there, to be honest.
Yeah, and so, it's interesting to see, like, is it just the time or is it her?
Oh, I think it's her.
I think it might be some of the time too, because I think a lot of, from what I've seen in other shows, it's just like I think children were seen and not heard, heard but not seen. They weren't, they were just like, they did what, parents, they did what the parents told them to do. They, went to their room, they did what they needed to do. Parents just more had control over what their kids were doing in the 50s. And they kind of made sure that their kids were just doing what they were supposed to be doing. And they didn't, they go to school, they go here, and as long as somebody's watching them, that's what they did. I mean, even when you watch Mad Men in the 60s, the kids are the same way. They either, they don't go out running around playing. They sit in their room and they watch TV. They were, and they went to bed when they were told. They came to the dinner table when they were told, and
I,
I think it's
I think
I
it's
think
her.
little kids also had free reign back then as well.
But sorry, this is my toddler. She's still
yeah.
awake.
I mean, they
Uh,
had free. I mean, they had free reign to a certain extent when you're older, but I mean, when you were little, I think it's the free reign. I think was a little different than when they were babies. Than when
I was always under the impression when I watched this the first time that it was her, because and this episode really kind of shows that, because she doesn't have any pictures of her kids to share with people. But I do think I don't think she's a natural mother. I don't think she comes across as one anyway. I mean, she pushes her kid around in the pram and stuff like that, but who sits on their kids?
Yeah, I
And
think it's a
I
who
agree.
combination of
mostly
both.
ignores them?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
think
Yeah,
it
do
that
think
might be
was
a
it's her.
combination of the two.
I also think, I mean, we've seen Amy Sherman Palladino shows treat children very similarly regardless of the time. So I kind of think there's a little bit of that going on too. And that also could be
her upbringing.
her own upbringing and being of the time. Like I kind of feel like they go hand in hand a little bit, because on Gilmore Girls we see that, like, the little kids, not like, Rory Lane as children, but like, or I guess young adults, but um the little kids are sort of treated weirdly, like, not just that they're not around, but that they're not really talked about. We don't hear about, like, Suki and Jackson's kids that often, and even though we know they fully exist, there's something going on there. So I always felt like it was a combo of the time, because I heard stories from my mom, where when her parents were raising children, that's kind of how it was. But also, ASP kind of having that trend show up in her shows.
What I think is super funny, and I don't know if this was mentioned during Saturday's watch because I wasn't here for it, but I did catch up on the episode. I think it's funny that ASP loves to describe children's hands as being jam or jelly like, because in that episode Susie says, is it Susie? Susie?
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
yes.
Yeah, she says that when she's holding um the little boy's hand, she says that it felt like he had jelly on his hands or something like that.
Yes, Ethan
So I
had
thought it
very
was
sticky
funny.
hands. Yeah.
It reminded me of jam hands from Luke, so I thought it was funny.
Something that the comparison that I made was Um, the comparison between how Lorelai in season at the end of season 6 is so desperately trying to get something from Luke and he denies her, and then only days later it flips and he comes asking and she at that point says no. And that is similar here because we saw Midge also begging Joel not to leave,
Yeah.
not to leave. And only like 2 days later, she's like, sorry.
Yeah, and why do we think she said that? Like, is it because he left and she doesn't trust him? Or is it because she likes what she's doing now? Like, she sees her life differently?
I think it's because he left. And he left, not only did he just leave, but he left her for his secretary, and everybody knows it. So why would she want to take him back? Remember that conversation she had with Imogen in the exercise room where she was talking about, if nobody knows, you can take him back, but once everybody knows, they know that he left and then you took him back. They had a whole conversation about that. And I'm sure that kind of is part of what she's thinking about is that he left and she asked him not to and he did, and he didn't come back before everybody found out, kind of
But
thing.
but do you
I would
think
say
that
no too, maybe.
but do you think that that also, because that would suggest that, like, I guess there's a part of me that wants to feel or wants to believe that at least some part, if not the larger part of why she isn't taking him back, is that she's getting a taste of what life is without him and she likes it.
Exactly.
I think
That's what I
that's
think.
I think that's part of it, but I also think that given the social structure of the time, he left knowing full well exactly what position he was leaving her in. And Chris, like you said, with the conversation with Imogen and like all that, um you know that is the society they're in, and he willingly walked out and willingly put her in this very vulnerable position where her livelihood and in a lot of ways her safety is just seemed um just completely irrelevant to him. So that's I think part of it too, is that she realizes that this person willingly put her in a position that's pretty critical. And um yeah, I do think she's having a good time. I think she is doing that, but she does have that one scene with Susie where she says this has to work, where she's actually scared. She is actually um terrified about what is going to happen to her because he left. And
Yeah.
so, she actually has to figure it out. Like, is she having a little bit of fun and some laughs along the way? Yeah. But he actually ruined her entire life. Like, I
And
mean,
not only did he leave, but when he was with her, he wasn't honest with her about their financial situation.
yeah, he
She
lied.
didn't realize. Yeah, he lied.
Right.
He
Yeah.
She didn't realize the apartment was his dad's. She didn't
Right.
realize that he didn't have any savings. All that stuff was revealed during the dinner, and how devastating to her. That's what drove her back to the comedy club to say more stuff because she was so frustrated and upset.
Well, and
I
also
mean,
Well,
her whole family knows. Her whole family knows that she wasn't in the secure position that she believed that she was in. So not only does his leaving sort of upend what she thought she had, it's now revealed all of the things that she didn't know that she didn't have. And so I could see her feeling quite betrayed by everyone in this family in a way, because
Yeah.
right.
because
Right.
daughters are married off and daughters are just sort of tossed around, and they make all the decisions for what is to become of her as an adult, and she had no say in any of it. So it's her spirit, I think, is a little bit too um headstrong. And I think she's now, all the ways that she channeled her independence in a way, or maybe not independence, but like her skills like into, you know, getting the brisket and getting the rabbi and getting all the things. She's now realizing that all of those skills are applicable somewhere else for herself and only herself. And I think that's slightly addictive because she realized that all that she was doing was for absolutely nothing. She was lied to by her whole family. She was lied to by the person that, you know, she's supposed to trust. And, you know, like we've talked about this too, like her and Joel weren't just an arranged marriage. They were literally so unbelievably in love. And so she is feeling so betrayed by her best friend in a way.
I just want to
Right.
jump in real quick and let you guys know that the couch is open now. If you guys want to raise your hand to come up.
Okay. Also, I had a thought on that while we're still on that topic before we get on to something else. She was begging Joel to stay until he blurted out to her that he was having an affair with his secretary. When she just thought he was unhappy, and you know, he was unhappy with his career and his hobby of the comedy, and felt not adequate, that she was trying to convince him to stay. But I think once
That's
she
true.
realized that he had been having an affair, she stopped begging him to.
Right, and
As she should, yeah.
I think she's not really caring about that part of society right now. Like I think she's starting to see a different side. So she may have been feeling that at the beginning when she was in the exercise class, but I mean like she's wearing pants like and going to the jazz club and you know smoking the marijuana cigarette. Like she I don't I almost think that that might not be in her mind right now, and I think maybe she's kind of enjoying this kind of freedom. And so I don't know. I think that might be a part of it too. Like I think she wants to see where this can go because she worked so hard to build him up and was going to the club with him and writing these things, and she realized that those were her jokes. Her jokes were funny and that she could do this, and now she has her own dreams. So I think it's probably that she doesn't trust him, but I think also it's more likely that she wants to see this world. If she didn't see this world, and she was just going to these exercise classes, I'm sure she would have taken him back when he came back.
Right.
But now
Oh,
she has this
I don't
whole
know if
thing
she would have
open.
taken him back right away.
I think she would
All
have because that's what they do in that
yeah,
society. Like
like
she
that's
didn't
she
know that
was
you could do
raised to do
something.
that.
Right. She didn't know she could do something else. She didn't know that this world existed. And so I think, you know, that's just what they're expected to do. And that's what her parents expect her to do. That's what his parents expect. And she's not doing that.
I think the judge contributed to part of her
I
decision
was
too
just
by
going to
kind of
say that.
talking
Oh,
down
that
down
judge,
to her.
man.
Yeah.
That
Yeah, I mean,
judge made me so mad. But
he basically was like, "What are you doing here without your husband? Where is he, and why didn't he take the day off for you?" Kind of thing.
yeah, and then he like he used every opportunity he could basically to hit on her or to talk about the way she looks, but was like, but you're still nothing without your husband here by your side. Like it was gross.
Well, but also I think she has a moment in that courtroom and you could see her face change, right? I mean, Rachel Brosnahan does such a great job of it where she's, you know, she's playing the part. She's like, okay, I got to do this to get myself out of this situation. And, you know, it was a very Lorelai Taylor good girl type of moment where she was like, no, that's not what I'm going to handle from this guy. But I think in that moment she realized like, oh, letting Joel walk out the door means giving up that life where I'm treated as a thing and as something that needs to be taken care of by my
Yeah.
husband.
And
And I just think it was a realization on her part to be like, you know what? No, I'm good.
I find it funny when Joel decides to come back. Like his first um, declaration is that he's sleeping on a couch and basically that his life is crap the whole 2 days that he's been apart from her. And I find it funny because, you know, this entire time she has thought that she would be nothing without him, and here she is living her best life while he's sleeping on a couch completely miserable.
Yeah, did you see the look in his face when she's like, "No, I don't want you back." That was like honestly great.
Yeah, I mean, I I have to be honest. You kind of see this scene coming from the moment that he leaves. I mean, I could have predicted that he was going to come crawling back pretty soon. Maybe not 48 hours later, but you sense that the guy and and also his father says it in that scene. He's like, "Oh, he'll be back. My son has a problem with following through." I mean, it's just the perfect description of the Joel character.
Yeah, he's a weak man. That's, that's what he is that he doesn't follow through. He makes a rash decision. He doesn't even prepare adequately for his sets at the club. He has his wife get him a good time. Like, he isn't following through. He's very lost. He doesn't know who he is or what he wants, and he makes rash decisions, and it kind of makes sense that it totally makes sense that he would come back because he's got nothing else going on,
and he
and
and society gives him the society at this time gives him that pass to do that kind of stuff.
oh yeah, I mean, I feel like he's a dime a dozen, at this, I mean, in general, but at this point for sure, like, I'm sure there's tons of,
Yeah, not
men
suggesting that
doing
it
that.
doesn't still happen, but I mean, he just has all the power to to do what he wants without much repercussion. If he wants, I mean, obviously, and this is an example of of where it doesn't go the way it would go for 99% of women and men in this situation at that time. I mean, I'm sure many women have taken back their husband at this in this era after they've done that, and then a day or two later, came back saying they want to give it another go.
I think part of the
This
reason he went back was because he didn't know what she needed the money for, and he started thinking about what she could be up to and what's happening,
that's
and it made
true.
him think about her. And I think that's part of the reason he wanted to go back. I mean, I'm
That
just
that's
there's
true,
a number of things, but
but he is
yeah.
he does say as Mandy pointed out, he does say that 2 days in, 2 days in, and he's already miserable. I mean, like really, like he couldn't even get 2 days before he's like, I want to come home. And just at this time, that would have been like, sure, honey, like that would have happened like crazy. This is the story about a woman who defies that, and so that's why he doesn't get that
he he reminds me of a child who decides to run away from home and packs their suitcase and then goes and hides in the backyard because they don't know where else to go.
that's that is
That,
very funny. I've never heard of that before, but it makes sense.
Well, I think like he realizes that, or maybe he doesn't realize it, but she did everything for him. Like she supported him in ways that he obviously didn't. And she thought while she was doing all of these things, he was being their financial support and he was not. So I think she
Yeah.
probably realized. And I think it was interesting that they showed that flashback of him like trying to stand up to his father and, just, I think, and then they had him come right after that, and I think she just was kind of seeing him in this new light, and she realized she's not going to get the support from him that she gave to him.
We could talk about Midge like crazy, and we absolutely will. But could we, while we still have time, shift over to Susie, because I thought that her storyline in this episode was so interesting and unexpected. Um, just in terms of what I expected to get from the character. There's so much more depth there now that I didn't see before. Her
don't
desire to
don't
get
you
into.
love how starstruck she got over Lenny Bruce?
Yeah, I love that, but I loved I loved the dinner club scene way more. Like that whole scene where she's like, I just, you see how she herself also like wants more than what she has right now. That she's also in a position to
That's
like,
how it parallels between the characters, and that's a thing that Amy Sherman Palladino likes
yeah,
to do.
Well, I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean, not only, like Susie's also in a like this whole idea of like becoming a manager. I mean, Susie's also in a man's world
right.
at that time, and she's having to come to this man who's who clearly has the town. She's so afraid she's going to actually lose lose this like new special thing to him if she even mentions the name of the person. It's really it's really exciting because it makes me feel like this is not just about Midge's journey, that this is also a big part of the show is going to be Susie's journey, and also we get it, there in the stairwell where she's like, you have a plan. She's like, oh, I definitely have a plan, and we of course know she has no plan. She has no plan. She's going to be figuring this out as she goes, which is terribly exciting.
Right, so she has to go to this gentleman's club, like to go meet them there, and
Yeah.
she is she's not like what a typical woman is in that time. She doesn't dress the same, she doesn't play the same rules, and so she's kind of embarking on her own journey as well. It's
Yeah,
really interesting.
like what's her chance of succeeding? I think that her chances of succeeding in that world with with competition like that guy, is like, I mean, that's like a mountain that she has to climb.
Yeah, and it's not just a man's world. It's like, going to the Friars Club is like an upper class,
Yeah.
like, it's two hurdles. It's two
Yeah.
giant hurdles getting in there, like I walk by the Friars Club all the time and I'm like I like cross the street. It's like very strange. It's
Yeah.
like I feel like I'm not dressed enough to like walk by, it's one of those things where she's very brave, that she's just sort of forging ahead into these spaces.
And what's interesting is also is that like Susie needs Midge to succeed for her to succeed, and Midge needs Susie to succeed. They need each other in order for this to happen, right? Like, uh, you know, Susie is banking on this idea that Midge is special and that Midge can be great, and Midge is putting a lot of faith in the idea that this person can actually get her the jobs that she needs.
Well, and they're also putting a lot into themselves, right? Like, Susie's banking on the idea that she might have an eye for this thing, that she might know when she sees it, which is so hard to quantify and
Right.
so hard to, that's a talent that you can't really teach, and she's hoping that that's her talent, that she can spot talent, and that's a really hard thing to do. So and Midge is banking on the fact that maybe she's funny, and she's not completely sure, and so they're both kind of taking a chance on themselves as well.
Midge, though, feels less confident in her abilities than Susie does. We do get a sense from Susie early on that like Susie believes she knows best when it comes to who is funny and who is not funny. I mean, that's the Susie we're introduced to in the beginning, like judging her husband's set, um, and Midge truly isn't completely sure that she's funny
She's probably
yet.
never really been allowed to be as funny as she is when she's up on stage because women are taught manners and proper etiquette and all this kind of stuff, and they're not supposed to be the way she is when she's on stage. So I could see
But
where she would feel insecure about it.
yes, but I will say that what Midge does have, which is similar to Susie in this regard, is that she does have perspective on the world that she does, and that's what makes her comedy special. Is that she has perspective that she does feel 100% conviction on, right? She does find these aspects of society and a woman's role at this time to be real weird. And that's how she builds her comedy. So there is a little bit of Midge's self-assuredness in the actual comedy itself, right? Whether she thinks she can actually succeed. And by the way, I don't know if Susie's completely convinced that she can succeed. I think that Susie knows that she knows comedy when she sees it, but there's more. I think there's more to just knowing comedy or being funny than that will get these two to success.
One of the things I like about their dynamic that I think is interesting is that, like, what we saw in this episode is that Midge is more like calm and at ease with new situations, but Susie, even though she's street smart, she seems to be a little bit more fumbling. So you think, you would think that Midge would be a little bit more fumbling herself, but she isn't. And so it's interesting to see this character who's supposed to be like strong and real street smart, and then she's having these issues, like fumbling over Lenny and like not being able to like talk to her mom without having it being like awkward and uncomfortable. So I think that's really interesting.
Well, but if you think about it, like Midge, she's been taken care of her whole life up until this point, and in a certain way, she's still being taken care of. And Susie has had to take care of herself, and so I think there's a lot of grit in that, but I think there's a lot of fear also. The idea that
Yes, yes.
you're not sure how it's going to go tomorrow. So like, we see her apartment, we see her interior life, like it's not easy. It's really hard. And whereas Midge is like she's more calm, I think, because she feels like there might be a net underneath her because there always has been. So, and I feel like she's looking to Susie like, you're going to take care of me now, right?
Yeah.
Because she's used to having someone take care of her, even though she's super funny and headstrong and seems independent. She really has never been independent. Whereas Susie definitely has been independent and, you know, maybe had a ton of struggle to get to this point.
That is so that is so insightful, and it's true. It's what makes these two such an awesome combination. They are really the opposites of one another in that regard. The one who has struggled to get what they have, putting on this like, air of I'm tough, that we can see isn't all that tough, in certain situations, versus this very privileged person, somebody who's sort of lived a life of privilege, gotten all of that um, given to them, has had a relatively easy life, um, who then, has that sense of fearlessness because of it.
And then on the flip side of it, there's like, I mean, so much is set up for the two of them to have conflict, right? Because it is going to be the haves versus the have nots. The my life was tougher. No, my life was tougher. The Logan, Rory, like you had everything handed to you. You don't have any choices. You had all the choices type of conversation, like you could just see that happening. But, on the flip side of it, it's, who's to say that Midge's struggles haven't been similar in a way? You know what I mean? Like, there's going to be a really interesting conversation about womanhood in the 60s that comes from just these two people because they were both up against really specific challenges that apply to women in this time. And I think it's really interesting and is rich for discussion and for like I can't wait to like see what happens next, even though I know what happens next. But like, watching it again is like exciting because I'm like, oh yeah, like all this, like they are totally perfectly set up to get into some stuff, and it's really really cool.
Watching it again, Diana, lets us see, those of us who've seen it before, more than we did the first time, because the first time you're just so kind of caught up in the dialogue and everything that's going on. But now we kind of have an idea what's going to happen. So now we're really paying attention to things we might not have noticed the first time around. And I've been kind of enjoying that because it's just there. I just kind of forgot how much happens in these first few episodes. I mean, it's only been a few days time in her world, but a ton has happened. It's great.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I know on
Yeah.
first watch I was like blinded by all the beautiful costumes and all of
Exactly. There's
Well,
that.
just
those
there's so
costumes are
much.
very pretty.
It's like a feast for the eyes, and you got to remember to use your brain when you're watching this show.
Ugh, I hate using my brain.
Well, I mean, I will say, like, like these watches and these discussions definitely have primed my brain for future episodes. Like, I feel like I'm less inclined to be dazzled by all of the costumes in the world now. I do think about these things in the episode where I don't think I would have been thinking about it nearly as much going into subsequent episodes. I mean, I don't want to think
So
about it too
you
deeply.
will have a different kind of experience than those of
Yeah, I'll
us.
definitely have a different
Yeah.
kind of experience. But I will say I don't want to think about it too much. I don't want to intellectualize the show while it's happening. I love doing that in the post show. Um, you know, but I to a degree I do want to be just sort of swept away a little bit, by this. This world is just so it really is like a journey, a real journey. I love it. I just absolutely love it. I
It's
love the
it's
show.
beautiful in like so many different ways. It's just the show regardless of what they're saying in the storyline, it's just beautiful to look at
Gosh, I
for
mean,
me.
there's another one where I wish that I mentioned this in Gilmore Girls when as we were going deeper into the show, how I was starting to feel like regret for having not like being able to tell people who I worked with like how much I enjoy their work on the show. But here's another one where I saw Amy and Dan like only 3 years, like about 3 years ago. I saw them actually at Sean's wedding. And yeah, I mean, I didn't know the show, so I couldn't really talk to them about my feelings of it. But man, do I regret not having watched the show, because I would have loved to have had that conversation with them and be like, "You guys, wow."
Next
So,
time.
Diana, I have to tell you something. So, growing up in Maine, I've always wanted to go to New York. So, like, listening to you describe the different aspects of the show and like where they're going. And when I was growing up, like, literally, even now, it's like our culture, I guess, in Maine is if you go to New York, you're going to get mugged. Like, that's just what's going to happen. So, you're going to walk the streets, someone's
Really?
going to come up and mug you.
I mean, you
Yeah.
might.
And like, and so every time I see it, I'm always like, oh, someone's going to get mugged. And that's just what we think about New York. Like,
You
if you're
might,
going to
you
go.
might, but it's not that likely. If you were to teleport, if you were to like time travel back to the '80s, then that's a different story.
Also, a big tip when traveling is if you look like you know where you're going and what you're doing, even if you don't, you're less likely to be a target, no matter
Also,
what city you're in.
don't ask Rory for directions in New York. She'll give you the wrong one.
True.
Well, she has that withering stare too.
Well,
So
there's
Tiffany, you've
that.
never been to New York City.
No, like I've driven through because we've gone kind of all over the East Coast down to Florida. But it's my dream. Like I would love to go to Broadway and stuff, but it's just one of those weird things that I guess living in Maine, like it's just you ask anybody and it's like, oh no, don't go there. Like, and like even driving through, I have like people who just like casually just don't even know me, just like hear that I'm going through. They're like, make sure you go between this time and this time. You don't want to hit it in New York and go through the city at night. And so
Wow,
it's like this huge thing, but it kind
interesting.
of, but it's interesting because it's like, but now you want to go even more. Like you just kind of want to be like, what would really happen?
Don't listen to
If
everybody.
you've ever lived for any period of time in a major city, a dense urban jungle like New York City or Chicago, that it seems funny, I guess.
I follow way too much true crime that like, the story is always
Yes.
in remote places and I'm like
It's
very scared of
it's so
remote
funny
places.
because I was
That's
watching
funny.
something that today about that, and like they were like, well, this town was a very sleepy, small, quiet town. I'm like, aren't they always?
Always.
Like, isn't that always where
Oh
this
yeah,
happens? Like, where are the big city crimes?
Well,
yeah. I
and
mean, I
that's
could see.
I'm afraid to run hardly around where I live. I don't, it's rural. I could be in the wood. I don't want to be thrown in the woods and be lost for a long time or whatever. I want somebody to be able to find my body. But I like to run in Akron. There's a lot more crime in Akron, but I liked running in Akron because there's people more than I like running down here.
I mean,
That's very true.
when I lived in Chicago, I used to walk walk at night at like 4 in the morning, like going to meet friends or something, or coming back from meeting friends, taking the L, or Chicago's essentially Chicago's subway at like all times of the year, and I never, ever, ever, ever felt nervous and weird about it, because there's something about a big city like that feels like it's never really asleep. There's always some sense of life happening. And so, in a way, you do feel like you have eyes on you all the time. That, like, if something's happening, the city's watching you, the city's got your back. Whereas being in some remote, like that actually scares me a little bit more. I mean, I can get creeped out about just being like alone in some weird, sort of remote area. Um, but for the same reason that Diana just mentioned, is that like whenever you hear about these crazy crimes, it's always in some small town, or somebody jogging down some secluded road, and that was the last you ever saw them. You never hear, or rarely hear those true crime stories like in the heart of a city where there's all this hustle and bustle.
Well,
You
and
have
also,
watched SVU, right? There's some stories of that based in New York that are
sure,
true.
but the thing is, if something happens to you here, it's more likely that there are many witnesses that would at least help you out or call the police. Like, it's true. I feel a lot safer in numbers. Like, I don't know if I would be okay living by myself in a house, but I like living in an apartment building where I have neighbors and, other people on the street, and like, a deli on the corner. And I feel like, not that nothing bad happens, because bad things happen literally every day here, but like, it just feels a little bit less likely. And I will say this too, like, Maisel is beautiful. Like, there's there's definitely a lot of, like, cleanup that happens on on this show for 1950s or early 60s New York. Like, I've never seen the Village Vanguard awning that clean. It never ever has it ever been that clean. And like, there is sort of a um uh, it's not like whitewashing, but it's more of like there's sort of like
Romanticized
it's
almost.
romanticized. Like, it got hit with a pretty stick. Like, it's definitely prettier. Like, I'm absolutely certain that the West Village and the East Village were not that pretty, as it shows up on
Don't you
screen.
sometimes have these vision, like I've been in places that are like kind of historic places, and I just like have like a quick snapshot vision of what it might have looked like, way back when it was newer, or years earlier. And my visions usually are that like things aren't quite so worn, that the sides of buildings aren't quite so chipped, and like that actually all of it is kind of newer looking.
Sure, but I do think that I mean, I just kind of feel like there had to have been a lot more dirt and grime on the
Like when you
streets
like when you see
than
a
they're
when you
showing.
like when you see a like something like a like painting, some building that's like got like chipped paint, or cracked and curling paint. At one time that wasn't chipped and cracked and curling. At one time it looked like brand spanking new. And I don't know. I think about that for like for even for big cities like New York, or Chicago. I think about like, what did this look like when it was first built. Um, I lived in an apartment in Chicago that was like new construction in an area of the city that is very urban. Essentially like Chicago's version um, of brownstones, or they were brownstones, graystones. And it was like a new construction brownstone. and looked just completely modern and new, and stood out against all of the other brownstones on the street, which looked like old, and the 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 stone was worn on the edges and chipped and whatnot. But I would always look at my apartment building, and just, or this, like, small little, I mean, really just a brownstone in the midst of all of the other ones, and look and just think, like, God, at one time all of these other ones looked as new and clean and all of that as that. And it might not have been as clean back during this era, but there's something about seeing New York City look clean like that that makes sense to me. Certainly, I like it. I mean, I kind of like that idea of traveling back to an era where everything is like newer than it is today. But it also just kind of makes sense to me.
Can
That's
I
like
just say that all of you talking about getting killed while you're running makes me so happy. I don't think I'll ever run.
What?
So you're
Well,
just giving me like another reason.
mm,
I don't know why you had
you're
any
like,
reasons to begin with, but okay.
I'm off. Bye,
Have a
everyone.
great night.
We'll see you all soon.
Bye,
Good
John.
night.
Night.